Hey, what's up, everybody? So I wanted to talk a little bit about, so you would think, like I grew up in the deep South, so like deeply religious, strongly religious. And it's a very interesting thing because when I first started talking about all this a few weeks ago, the most resistant people in my life were friends and family from the deep South. And I thought that was interesting because uh, they're scared of it when they're tapped into the same thing. It really doesn't matter what awakens you to the fact that to life. Like you can be spiritually awakened. You can be all kinds of ways can lead you there. I saw that firsthand as a kid. I saw dramatic changes in people, like the moment they, were saved and saw that whole thing. And I always found it interesting because none of them could ever really describe the feeling or whatever, other than just like this belief. And they couldn't, explain it to you or get you to understand it. You either got it or you didn't, and that's just the way it is. And I have found that interesting that they have the hardest time just because I don't label it in that way. I don't label it. Um, wasn't a religious, although I definitely spent my time in that world. I grew up as a kid going to church 3 times a week, vacation Bible schools, Sunday vacation camps. Uh, trips, church trips. You name it. That's just life in the South. So I definitely know um, where they're coming from for sure. But I just don't because one thing I learned in the military, one thing I found interesting when I started going overseas and getting to know other cultures is that I would meet people in all walks of life that were tapped into the same thing, and you could just tell that just by meeting them, you know. And if you could just like get past the fact that they from where they were from, or like obviously like as Middle East was a big influence on the time I served, and it's a very different culture. So it's very difficult to look past that and get beyond that and see that that's just what's kind of guiding them to tap into the same kind of thing that. So when I decided to start sharing with friends and family, and there was even days where I thought about trying to individually connect to like that group of people in my life in that way because I do understand the spiritual aspect, but then that's not true to 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 me, 100%, because um, I know that, and it can be attained that way. But the idea is to get people to see that people, all of us, doesn't matter where we're from, we're all on this planet. So, like, we're all capable of tapping into the same or doing the same things. And when you start talking using terms like tap it into and feeling, and that freaks people out, man. They just start to freak out because that sounds something like out of this world, out of this, which is weird if you think about it, because most people run around talking about, the afterlife. you know, that's all you hear about is, uh, when we die and go to heaven and all these places, and everyone but when you start talking to them about being aware of that fact in any way, like that's when people freak out. Like, it's wow, makes no sense. Like, they'll have national uh, like church services on TV, and everyone's there and they're doing it. So you're talking about it already. Like that's what you're going there to acknowledge, right? That when it's all said and done, that's why you're going. I would assume. I don't know. So I don't know why it's so weird when what the problem is each group has been told that that's the only way. Because and maybe at one point in time that you had to you had to do that so that everyone would believe it. If that was everyone in a certain area, and there was no way for people over here to tell people over there. So everyone over there was told, "Hey, this is the only way, yo, dude. If you don't do this, you're out." I mean, that's the same rules apply in my neighborhood. Like, that's just that. I mean, that's basic. That's what we did in elementary school. I mean, come on. So no, I wasn't gonna do it if I was gonna like cater to a specific kind of a group, because not when it's just all the same. What's the point? If you're gonna try to put something out there, try to put something out there that not a lot of people are saying, talking about. I mean, make it worth your time at least. I mean, if it fails, it fails, right? But you never know. I mean, maybe somewhere down the line, someone sees something that makes it click. You just don't know. Sometimes you just gotta put stuff out there, see what happens to it. It's my thing. But it is confusing when it starts. I'll be honest with that, because if you've witnessed these different ways of people tapping into the same thing, like if you grow up in the Deep South and then you witness people, or you're experienced even tapping into it in that way, and then you were overseas and you experienced people tapping into it in that way, and then you've spent a lot of time on your own for whatever reason, then you've tapped into it that way, like, just through your own will. So, and then I'm sure that there's people that have found way, like, other ways to tap into it that I have no clue about. I mean, that's just how things work. So, and we just have associated negatives with whatever terms that is, because we don't understand it yet. And that's just what they're choosing to call it. They don't, you know, just like we call it what we call it. Okay. You put a name to it so that way everyone recognizes it, feel comfortable with it, knows what it is, blah, blah, blah. It's basic, I mean, you apply that same thing to anything in your life and it'll hold true. I mean, so I figure if we're going to do, if I was going to talk about it, then let's, I'd talk about it and talk about, because as it was coming along, like I said, when it started happening, like you're like, okay, is this because I've tapped into it this way before, or that way? And, depending on how many ways you tapped into it, you either go to one or several, depending on who you are. So you do confuse it if you stop there. Some people, that's all that's good enough. Okay, that's cool too. Like they tap into it, they associate it with bam, they go back to bam, and they're happy again. So, why take it any further? But if you go a little further, you realize you can start to put it together on even a bigger level, I think. And I imagine that there are people out there that have put it together on a much bigger level then. So I've always been open to possibilities, And I mean, you've only got to see something repeat itself so many times before, if you don't acknowledge it, I mean, what are you doing? Like, whether it exists, a pattern exists because of something that's completely random and has nothing to do with you, which I don't think is how it works. But for whatever reason, you're noticing it, I mean, so why not go explore? Go explore it. Like I see people all the time. They'll tell me things like, "Well, 888 is my number." Oh, really? That's cool. Why? I don't know. It seems like every time I turn around, either my clock's on 888, my watch is on 888. I'll look up at the TV to see what time it is, and it'll say 888, and which is cool, right? And but then they don't know why though. Why? Because the clock also is 777 I mean, all the time too. Like if 777 was important to you and you saw that all the time, um, it'd be important to you. So I mean, why? And I'm always surprised at why when they